Welcome back to the Behind the Well Show. I'm your host, Roger Abel, here with Elias Randall. Eli, cool day today. It's May 29th, which also known in our office as 529 Day.
What an exciting day.
You know, it makes me think about, and for those of you who don't know what we're referring to, we're referring to the 529 College Savings Plan. And I've seen lots of people start these and not have a lot of direction or purpose as to why they're doing them. And I look back to when my kids were started. You know, we're privy to information and just a little bit of knowledge that the general public probably doesn't pay attention to on a daily basis. But one of the things that I made a priority in my family was that we started these 529s right away. Because I probably wasn't a whole lot different than most 23-year-olds. When I was 23, I was in this business. My priority was not saving at 23. So there were a number of years where I missed out on the opportunity to sock a bunch of money away early in life. But when it happened with my kids' college, I understood the importance of making a large lump sum deposit up front and then setting up systematic contributions with automatic raises. And I'll be honest with you, how much money I already have in these things, I'm a little shocked by, because number one, I can't check them every day. They don't show up on my LPL account. I actually have to go physically log in to a different website, do an authenticator on my phone app to see what they're worth. So I really check these like 2 or 3 times a year. That's it. But here's the one thing that I noticed when I checked it versus what I notice in reality. The contribution amount I want is almost double for my one daughter from when I started, because I put an automatic $25 increase every year on the account. Guess what I've never noticed out of my bank account?
The increase.
I never noticed the increase. And it's helped get a lot more money into these plans. And I think that, you know, if there's individuals listening or watching the show that have young kids or you're expecting, start at the day they're born. Don't put it off, because you're just missing out on it. And if you look at one of the largest problems in our society right now, it's student loan debt. It is. And I know there's parents out there that say, I don't want to pay for my kids' college. And I'm not telling people that you have to pay for your kids' college, but if you desire to do it, start early. You know, I have this plan that I want my girls to have a little skin in the game. That doesn't mean that I can't still pay for it. Just means I'm going to have them have some skin in the game at some point. Because when somebody thinks they're paying for it, will they do better or worse if it's their own money?
They will do better.
Typically, right? But you could pay for it. Your kid could pay for it, and you could take the money out of the 529 because you have the receipts to do it and pay them back down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could even make them go through the process of doing student loans, and then you just use the 529 to pay off the loan. Like, there's ways to make them participate in the situation.
So we have one client who I think has done a good job with his kids. So he set them up with the 529 plan, but once they went to college, they were responsible for that 529 plan.
Yep.
They have to call, they have to get the money, they have to do the work. Dad's not doing it for them anymore. I think it's great because we get the call.
Here's your account number and the phone number. Good luck.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
And we need more of that in life. So I just thought today being 5/29/24, we just bring up a little 529 story.
Happy 529 day. You know, the other benefits to some of those plans, too, from the systematic perspective, is a lot of them have like a target date type option, but designed for college savings and not retirement target date, but kind of when you're going to start college. So you can do, in addition to the systematic investing, systematic increases, you can set the investment portfolio on a glide path as well, right? So you can just take all the thinking out of it and just put the money away, and over time, hopefully it does really well for you.
And I will actually, that's a really good point. Typically, I would not use a target date fund, which is what you're referring to, like a glide path fund. I typically wouldn't use that for my own investing, right? Because I want to go figure out what my risk capacity is and how I should be allocated, not some arbitrary number in the future. But because I don't watch this account very much, I want it on the glide path. Mine's on the glide path where it's going to automatically get them a little more conservative because I don't want to have to watch it, one, because it's taking care of itself. But number two, what I don't want to do is have it be 100% equity the year before my kid goes to college and the market go down 40%.
Well, and it's also easier to define the time horizon.
It's known.
Right? You're going to save for 18 years. You're going to spend it over 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
so the investing should go in line with that.
I mean, I'll likely, when she goes to college, put it all into the liquid cash reserve bucket.
Yeah,
Like,
you're not
there's
going to
no
want
reason.
any risk at that point.
It might even be 2 or 3 years before college. I think about how we put money into buckets for people in retirement. Well, we want to have 1 to 3 years of cash. It'll depend on where the market is a little bit, but if the market's doing well, we haven't had any big corrections, 2 years out, it'll likely just go to cash at that time and sit there, and hopefully we have decent cash yields and the money will be there to pay for it. But those are just some tips on it. And I think, from my own purview and perspective, I've been fortunate to watch it work and see the power of the automatic escalation and increase and the power of what that can do for people. Something I was teaching a class last night at the local hospital, and we're talking about retirement. And one of the person brought up, what are some of the regrets that you see people tell you that they have about retirement? And I think there's like 4 things that people that tell you they have regrets share in common. And the number one thing, especially right now, and then this might just be because it's top of mind, meaning it just happened, but a lot of people didn't plan on the cost of living increases that were going to happen. And I think back to like the FIRE movement. People who, financial independence, retire early. People who saved all this money so you can retire at 38. Do you think they plan on 9% inflation?
No, because no one was planning on 9% inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe once the pandemic got started at some point, people probably thought that could happen. But certainly before that, no one was planning on 9% inflation.
Well, and think about the longer you're retired, the more inflation affects your plan.
Yeah, because it's taking away spending power for more years.
I have a feeling a lot of the FIRE movement people, they're going to be part of the rehirement movement. They were retired for 10 years and they're going to get rehired.
It's very possible.
I think I've watched how much people thought they needed. I think they vastly underestimated how much they actually need to retire.
I would agree. That's probably the biggest. Anytime I watch any of the FIRE movement stuff, the figures that they use and say, oh, you can retire at age 40 or 45 with X, that number is typically much lower than what I would feel like I could agree with. But I'm also not setting out to do that. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what they've figured out is how to do it off that.
Well, the other thing I think, another commonality that I hear is people underestimate taxes and the effect of Roth conversions, because I feel like people don't even think about doing Roth conversions now until they're retired. And then all of a sudden they're converting these Roths and they're losing out on the number one, power of the Roth, and it's long-term tax-free growth. If you're doing a conversion at 62, 63, 64, and all of a sudden you're pumping yourself into the 22, 24, 32% tax bracket to do this, you have to ask yourself, what am I going to spend this money? And there's so many factors people ignore. They ignore the fact that if I go over $206,000 household income, now my Medicare premium goes up $70 a month minimum. If I convert a big one, it could go up $419 a month.
Yeah.
It's the number one regret I think people have about Roth conversions. And this is not in any way a knock on accountants or anybody who does accounting or tax planning. They typically don't look at the effect on Medicare premiums, if you do a Roth conversion, they're primarily taking a look at what does it do to your long-term tax game. But it all depends on when you're going to use this money. Yeah, if you're going to pass this all to your kids, getting into a Roth sooner rather than later is probably really good. But if you're going to use this money in the next 5 to 8 years, is a Roth conversion really worthwhile? And especially if you end up paying a lot more in Medicare taxes.
Right. And if you're going to, and this is in my opinion, if you're going to use IRA money to live on, you already know you're going to be taking money out of your IRA for income. To have a distribution plan plus do the Roth conversions, I mean, at that point, it's going to be so hard. Now, it's going to be hard to benefit in your lifetime on that. But if it's like a legacy planning tool, if you're doing it to pay the taxes so you can pass it on tax-free, like I can see that argument. And that would maybe be beneficial and you'd feel good about that. But a lot of times the Roth conversions, it causes other expenses like you mentioned. And if you're going to spend down an IRA, you're going to pay the tax anyway. And I know why people do it. And then the other thing, I'll comment on this. If you're a younger listener, there's a really good argument to be made for directing money into Roth accounts. And the question I ask everyone is, do you believe taxes are going to go up or go down in the future? I don't think I've had anyone answer that question by saying, I think they're going to go down in the future.
I would challenge every single person listening to this show. Go pull out your federal tax return. Look at the page that shows gross taxable income, federal income tax paid. Figure out what percentage that is. So if you had $157,000 of taxable income and you paid $15,700 in federal tax, that's 10%. You need to ask yourself, do I really want to get a tax deduction? So I save 10%, meaning I put $10,000 in to save $1,000 in taxes today, or would I rather pay the extra $1,000 of tax today and have tax-free growth forever? Most people don't look at it. I know that because I hear people, I really need the tax deduction. You really need a 10% tax deduction.
I think you can even for people in higher tax brackets, maybe not all of their, like if you have access to a 401k, right, you can defer some taxes. That's probably a good idea if you're making enough money. I could still probably make an argument that you should forego the $7,000 tax deduction and deferral and do like a backdoor Roth or something. There's still probably, you can almost make an argument all the time for Roth money in someone's portfolio somewhere.
So you're saying we got a high income earner maxing out $23,400 a year. The biggest tax deduction they're getting is, let's just call it 40%. Like that's even on the high side. So that's like $10,000 a year. You're saying forget the $10,000, pay it.
Well,
and do all Roth.
Potentially. Yeah. But I'm saying maybe you want to defer, like if you want to max your 401k and defer some income. But I just feel like with the IRA limits being 7,000, like you can still have a small chunk end up in Roth every year.
Sure.
And long term, you're probably going to like having that.
I think for high income earners, it becomes a bigger discussion because a little bit is like, okay, what's my income today? How far away am I from retirement? And do I believe my income tax bracket will be the same as it is in 10 years when I retire? Right? I mean, if you're making, let's call it over $750,000, which there are a lot of people that do, maybe it's worthwhile to take some deduction today, especially if you know, hey, I'm going to have $150,000 of income when I retire. That's a significantly lower tax bracket. But it takes planning. I mean, that's why we put together financial plans for people to figure out, hey, what provides us an optimal outcome? And obviously that's not perfect science, but we can make sure people are on the right track to figure out what they should be doing to receive an optimal outcome, in their portfolio.
Yeah, and there was one other spending regret from someone. who retired at 55 in this article on MSN, and while they were working, they were donating a decent amount of money. So they're charitable gifting minded family. They like to give away money. And then there was some disagreements between the husband and wife on, are they going to continue at that pace when they retire? So that's probably a difficult discussion to have, right? Like, because if you're going to retire and have limited income, you might not be able to give away as much as you were while you were working. So the husband thought, well, we'll just cut that expense. According to this article, the wife did not want to do that. But again, that's something where I was reading it, and I don't know is that a spending regret because it's causing them to run out of money, right? But that wasn't made clear. Where if you've gone through a plan, like, you should know, can you continue, or what would be reasonable at that time,
Right.
But I don't know that giving away money to the point where now you need charity because you gave away all your money makes sense.
Well, in our planning tool, we have a drag box in there, charitable donations. We're able to quantify for an individual, hey, can you sustain this type of giving rate? And that's probably a good way to help a husband and wife figure it out versus guessing.
I would think so.
I mean, it's not hard. It's literally a drag box. As well, we want to keep doing $6,000 a year charitable giving. Does that work? Yes or no? If it doesn't, we can figure out what does. So I think those are good things to cover because those are things we hear from retirees. Elias, I was talking with a client the other day, and they were kind of working on their budget, and they're like, man, we're going to try to spend less. And I had a discussion with him. I'm like, maybe it's not about spending less. Maybe it's about how to figure out how to increase your income, because spending less is only part of a solution in any type of financial situation. I think about like our government. We try to spend less, right? Would spending less really move the needle that much?
I don't know that the government's a good role model for spending less.
But in general, when people say we're going to spend less,
about.
Think about it. Like, okay, there's only so much spending somebody can cut. The best way to get out of a financial mess is figure out how to get more income. That's your number one way to build wealth. So maybe there's some other things that people should be talking about doing instead of just, hey, I'm going to spend less, because likely you're not going to.
Spending less is probably the hardest thing to do financially, because when you're used to things and you like the way that they're going, it's hard to cut back.
For sure.
And spending less is just, it's boring.
Well, and having
too much sacrifice.
Having an unrealistic, super tight budget, it's going to work for a little period of time. It's not going to work forever. It's like weight loss. Anybody can go on a very strict budget for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe even 90 or 120 days. But can they do it for 2, 3, 5, and 10 years so it's actually sustainable, has a meaningful impact on their life and their health? The answer is very, very few can. Okay? So what we thought we'd do is come up with some things to maybe focus on instead of spending less to start to build wealth. What are some of the things we can do to help people get on a financial track that's not just spending less?
I think establishing priorities, or even recently I was talking with a young couple about, let's establish some minimums that we're always going to do, because they both have good jobs, make good salary, have been good savers. The one thing that they were doing that we're going to work on is they use emergency fund money. It's like their emergency fund and their vacation funds, all the same pot of money. So I think sometimes when you can prioritize or establish in your mind, what is the baseline, right? Like, what are the 3 or 4, just these are the minimums. Well, we're going to have an emergency fund of X. We're going to max out one 401k. And then I think if you can prioritize that stuff, or at least define what you want it to be, then if you're hitting those, the rest of the money you can spend, do whatever you want. Buy if you want a luxury item, or you want to do an extra trip because you have extra cash. I think to me it's much easier to do that, to define what needs to be done, and then you can kind of build your lifestyle around that, as opposed to well, I have this lifestyle. Now I'm going to cut down on everything. It's much harder to do it that way.
I think back to Jonas in our office always talks about lifestyle investments. And I think about the clients who figure out how to have the most satisfying retirement. And what they actually do is they set out goals, priorities, and values. So when you're doing your budget, it's noble to say, well, I'm just going to cut all this stuff and it's going to work out. Figure out what's important to you and work around it. So if your house is like what you're most concerned about and that's what gives you the most joy, you should prioritize your house over a car. Or like Joan, I'm going to use him for example because he's best at this. He really is good at this. Their family values family time and vacations. They like to take vacations. So they drive modest cars. They've been in the same house for maybe like 15, 20 years. So they don't take their money and spend it there. They allocate their money to experiences they get to do as a family. Everybody has like a certain amount of money to allocate to things, but too many people try to allocate it to everything. If they just sit back and say, what's most important to us? Remember when we did a podcast talking about having a vision board? It goes back to having a vision board. Write down the things that are important to you over the next 10 years. That'll help guide you and your family how you should start to budget and allocate your dollars. And you're going to have a much more fulfilling life, much more fulfilling retirement, all those different things if you start to put goals and priorities around this. I had a client the other day. They want me to work it backwards so they can figure out what their goals and priorities will be based upon their spending gap.
Interesting.
And we can do
It's
it.
challenging to do, though.
But it's a lot easier if you know what you want to do, and then we make the things work around your goals and priorities. If you want to give $40,000 to your church, let's figure out how to make it happen versus here's X you have open. Now go try to match your goals and priorities to it. Because sometimes I'm not sure those are goals and priorities. Like, are you just trying to find a way to allocate it, or is this how you actually really want to allocate it?
Yeah, I like that take. I think, you have to define what your goals and to me, it's easier to define the goals and priorities and then design any sort of planning around that. And I think another good tip in here, one of them talked about like reconsider your timelines. I think, and I was talking with a younger customer the other day. He kind of mentioned that like so far saving is kind of boring, and he's he's checking all the boxes, right, doing all the right things, but he's like 26, hasn't been saving money very long. So we kind of had the conversation around, well, yeah, because even when you get a 15 or 20% gain, it doesn't matter because you haven't been doing this long enough. But if you just know that you keep doing these things, eventually it's going to pay off. And don't get impatient. It's easy to get impatient, right? I go, man, I'm socking away whatever $500,000 a month. It just doesn't seem to be growing. It just takes time to kind of build it up, and then eventually you'll get there. And I think just understanding the priorities, the goals, the values, like those are the things that you got to focus on, especially in the beginning when you're getting started.
I think something that goes with that is the older you get, I feel like, and I've had this discussion with many people, the older you get, faster time goes. And you start to realize that, time's a limited commodity. And if all of these things are important to you, like, you want to spend time with your family, you have to figure out a way to quantify what your time is worth. I think that like do-it-yourselfers who do this, that's cool. You like to do it, but what's your time really worth? Have you quantified it? And the reason I say that is there was a study that came out that 26% of Americans said they'd take a 15% pay cut to free up more time. 41% of those were millennials. This is a study by Empower.
A 15% pay cut to have more time.
Yeah.
Back. Yeah.
No, that's called doing.
Well, dude,
that's time, desire, and knowledge. So
yeah,
I bought a book, and it's called Buying Your Time Back. And I haven't read the whole book yet, but it's all about this idea that if it's something that you don't like doing or you can do something that's more productive in that time. You pay someone to do it to buy your time back. You're paying money to get it back. Good example for me. I never, ever want to start a lawnmower again.
What?
$55
Mowing
a week.
lawn's fun.
$55 a week. Guess what? I bought 2 hours of my time for $55. It's $27.50 an hour.
Pretty cheap, actually. When you
Pretty
think of
cheap,
it that
dude.
way,
Seriously.
that's pretty cheap.
Now, I get it. Some people love to mow their yard, but I kind of live by this. If I don't like to do it, we're going to hire people to do it. And here's the other thing. If you don't really enjoy doing it and like to do it, and now you're spending your time, are you doing a good job or a bad job at it? You're just going to get it done.
Yeah, you're just getting it done. You don't care.
When I mow my yard, do you think I spent a bunch of, because I did it like 10 years. I tried to do it about 5 years ago. I did it for 1 year. I'm like, forget this. Do you think I did a great job, or I just did as quick as I could to get her done?
As fast as you could.
Fast as I could. I
Did
didn't
you
go
weed
back.
trim around the fence?
Yeah, weed trim, but I didn't blow everything
around
off, right? You know, I had a buddy of mine who taught me a great thing about weed eating under a fence. You don't weed eat under a fence. You spray Roundup under a fence. Actually, if you have a fence,
Roundup is an effective weed eater for fence.
Yeah, but
line.
then it never grows up under your fence. It actually works pretty good. But
I agree with that.
I just think
You
about
can also
people.
go around your trees.
I'm careful. I'm
Just
careful around
enough,
the
just
trees.
enough, so then you can just turn the mower around the tree and you can get all the grass, and then you don't have to weed trim around your trees either.
Yeah, I don't mow it anymore, so I don't know. But just think about that. Time is your most valuable asset. If you value all these things with your family, figure out how to get your time back so you can spend more time doing all the other things that go into a satisfying type retirement. I just thought that was a very interesting article that amount of people are willing to pay money to get time back.
They are, and I think what this made me think about is over the last few years, so we all have limited time, and I would love to tell everyone that listens to the podcast that I have time for like everything I enjoy. Like I would love to be able to golf, play pickleball, officiate football like I do, spend time, the time I need to spend working, spend time with my family. You only have so much, right? So certainly for me over the last couple of years, like I've had to trim down what I'm willing to spend my time doing and say no to more things than I used to. And part of it is a lot of it's family driven, just with the age of my kids and where our family's at. I don't have time for other things. I don't have time to go golf. I'd love to be a good golfer. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But I'm also there's no time, and I can't make time for it. So I think as you go throughout life too, just whether it's financial planning or anything, I think everyone gets to a point where you have to start deciding this is what I can spend my time doing and these other things I can't.
I thought there were some other good insights to this too. Almost half of Americans feel they're running out of time to save for retirement. But here's what's ironic. 44% of those people say they started putting money away early enough, but they're still concerned about running out of time to save for retirement. And I wonder if that's just moving the goalpost a little bit. Like, hey, I wanted to get to X, I got there. Because most people, if they started putting money away in their 20s and 30s, they're usually doing fairly well for retirement. It's the ones who are 50 who haven't got started yet that really feel the pinch of running out of time to save for retirement. And it's never too late to save. It's not. You're just going to have to buckle down.
I think another category or portion of people that would fall into that, maybe you've always done the savings plan where you worked, but, well, I put in 3% because they match me 3%. How many times do you hear something like that? Like even if you start when you're 25, depending on your salary, that might not be a high enough savings rate to accomplish what you need to accomplish.
Likely won't. Well, since 2024 is the year of personalized advice, one of the things we're doing on every single show is we take a piece of common advice or a financial myth and we discuss it for a brief amount of time. This week, we're going to talk about saving versus investing. I think a lot of times we use the word saving, which can lead to common misconception that saving should be a higher priority than investing. So if the way I think about this, Elias, is saving is money that we're going to use in the short term. Investing is money we're going to use in the long term. And you got to figure out how to balance both of these types of assets. And we have a way that we do it at Premier. We use the bucket strategy. We prioritize when we're going to use these assets. We give our money responsibilities and goals, and then we're able to accomplish the things we want to accomplish while not running the risk of taking too much risk or too little risk as we go through life.
Well, and I think understanding the differences in those things is very important. In your retirement accounts, if you take your retirement money, you're 30 years old and you take retirement money and you buy a CD or you buy something that's just too conservative to accumulate over time, you're probably not going to hit your goals. I mean, unless you're going to have to save a lot more, right? If you're investing in things that don't have the growth potential that other things do. So I think understanding, and then also, right, like in my mind, all my savings is just systematic, because I'm not even going to start looking at that money as something I'm going to use until I'm between 55 and 60 years old. So for me as an investor, I just want to know that it's constantly happening. And I want it to be automatic, because I want to keep myself from, as an investor, well, I'm not going to buy today because I think the market might go down next week because I just read some article or just whatever I'm thinking. And then shorter term money that set aside for a car or whatever it might be, I don't want that money to have the same kind of risk on it and be able to fluctuate as much.
I think about, this thought came to my mind about what a financial plan does for people. If you're a young person, you have a plan done, and you come into this office, we get you to the point where you're making the correct contribution. It's set up automatically, right? It's all systematic. It's all systematic increases. Everything is set up how it's supposed to be. Arguably, that individual should have the confidence to walk out of here and not have to check their account every day, like I do with my 529. I know it's on cruise control. I know I'm on track for it because I went in here and ran college planning software and figured out what college is going to cost in 20 years based upon this state, this inflation rate. Like, I dialed all the numbers in, and ironically, they're so similar to what the software told me. It's crazy. Now, did I get a little lucky? Probably. Like, I had a daughter born at 16, put a pretty good lump sum in. Had another one born in 2019. I got a pretty good lump sum in right when they were born, and then I've done the systematics. But for a young person, if you come to our office and do the same thing, you can have the same result. And I check my other account balances, and they're all systematic too because they're easy. But it's kind of cool to go in and look at accounts that you don't pay attention to because they grow faster than you think. You check something every day. Think about someone who has a 401k with 100,000 in it. They check it every day. Well, it's 101 one day. It's 100,500 the next. It's 100,700 the next. It's 102 the next. It's 99 the next. Like, it doesn't move. The only way it moves is with their contribution. Let's say they're making 50 grand, putting away 10%. Okay, well, that's $200 every other week. It's super boring. But if they said day one of the start of this year, I'm not going to check this account till December 30th, it would be way more exciting.
When you looked at it?
Yeah. It wouldn't be.
If the market's up. I guess it'd be
or
exciting
down.
either
It could be
way.
exciting either way. It doesn't mean good
either
or bad
way,
excitement.
It's
But
exciting.
That's just a little bit of the takeaway from today's show. If you're not following us on social media, you can follow us on Facebook, BT Well Show. You can follow us on YouTube, X. You can get our podcast on all the major podcasting stations. If you are looking to get started and you want to get your personalized one-page Premier Vision document, you can visit us at btwellshow.com or click the link in the description if you want to get started. With that said, I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you tune in next week.